Thank you very much for being here today. My name is Esther Morales-Diekman. I am the director of the Office of Women's Policy. And one day after Equal Pay Day, we are here to talk about a very important issue, which is fair pay. We've used different terms over the last couple of weeks as we've waited for this time of the year, including the wage gap, equal pay, fair pay. So today is really about giving you good information about these issues that are affecting our families, our community, and us as individuals. So I'd like to begin this morning, this afternoon actually, with a kind of a sense of who's in the room. So I'm gonna read out some things, and if any of these apply to you, and you may raise your hand more than once, how many of you in the room are currently in school? Just by a show of hands. Okay, how about people who work in human resources or who make or influence employment decisions? How about people who have, at some point in their career, believe they have been paid less than others for doing the same work because of their gender? How many of you feel they have lost opportunities at work because they are mothers or caregivers? How about people who work or have worked in a non-traditional trade for women, which is defined as a sector which is comprised of 25% or fewer women, non-traditional jobs? How about people who feel uncomfortable talking about wages and salary with coworkers? How about people who feel comfortable that they are aware fully of their employee rights? How about people who want to work towards the goal of equal pay for equal work and fair pay for everyone? That got you. About maybe 3 months ago, we received a call from the EEOC in San Francisco. So those of you who are from San Jose, you sort of know the relationship that San Francisco and San Jose enjoy. You know, we sort of all would like to think we're the heart of Silicon Valley. And so it was kind of interesting to get a call from the San Francisco office of the EEOC, and Linda was reaching out to us to ask if we were interested in putting together an event on fair pay here in San Jose. And those of us who currently work together to look at the issue were very excited, especially as we started adding more and more federal partners. And it was amazing how many people and how many resources there really are out there. So to help us welcome everyone today, I would love to introduce the ringleader of today's event, Linda Lee from EEOC.
It's so great to see you all here. Thank you very much for coming here. I think here is a place where the process has been as fun as hopefully the result will be. All right, so here's the formal information about why we're doing this. As part of the White House's Equal Pay Task Force, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was charged with leading fair pay day events around the country. And so this is one of them, and maybe one of the first ones. I haven't checked with headquarters. And the goal is to focus attention on gender-based wage discrimination. So, you know, EEOC is the agency that enforces the Equal Pay Act, as well as other laws that prohibit employment discrimination. So we were kind of the ringleader, as was mentioned, for a really wonderful group of folks. We have the main partners in crime listed up here, EEOC, Department of Labor's OFCCP, or Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, the Women's Bureau, the Santa Clara County's Office of Women's Policy, the Coalition for Fair Pay, the Catherine and George Alexander Community Law Center, and the Legal Aid Society Employment Law Center, as well as San Jose State University's Women's Resource Center. Thanks very much for organizing the venue. We really appreciate that. And there is in the program a whole host of wonderful supporting organizations and resources listed. I hope at your leisure you'll explore those organizations. One of the things that HM, who's a part of CCP, and I talked about before we set up this panel is we didn't want to have any government people on the panel because we get bored of hearing government people talk. We thought it would be more authentic to hear from people who actually do the work, as you know, advocates, as workers, as HR folks. So, and last week, when the furlough was about to happen, we were so happy we organized it this way. So thankfully, we are all here today, even the federal agencies. But what we wanted to do was have our panelists up here, but we wanted you to know that the federal and state and local agencies are here in the audience to help answer questions and make sure you know what your resources are available to you. So that's the quick or not so quick intro.
So one of the things that we thought would be helpful today is just to sort of set a tone for the day. In looking at the wage gap, one of the things that was very important is the idea that from the very top, from the White House, the administration, the issue of equal pay, fair pay has been very, very prominent. I think we've had a lot of very good communication there. And I think the message has been very much promoted that the wage gap affects everybody. It affects women, men, children, families, entire communities, and our country's economy. So one of the things that we've looked at with the downturn in the economy is that many more families are relying on the income of women. So economic conditions for women are a big issue for us here in Santa Clara County and San Jose. And one of the things that President Obama said, which I think is very good, is that households where one breadwinner is paid less than she deserves, that's the difference between affording the mortgage or not, between keeping the heat on or paying doctor bills or not. So those of us that are working in the community, talking to families, working with families, you see very much how the economy has impacted our families. And really, women have been the engine to get us through what has been one of the most difficult times in our nation's history. So we have folks here today that are on the front lines of the issue, and I'm really excited to be with them and to help them, introduce them to you. To help start our discussion for today, I'd like to introduce Joan Goddard, who was asked to be here today because she has been active with the National 9 to 5 organization. But Joan also does a lot of things. She's a member of the National Committee on Pay Equity, which sponsors the Equal Pay Day nationwide and the federal fair pay legislation. Joan is a retired librarian, and she is also sort of our grammar guru and editor. She's the former president of AFSCME Local 101 and was a member of the negotiating committee during the 1981 pay equity strike right here in San Jose. So the first question goes to Joan Goddard, and as we move through the day, we'll be introducing the different people that are speaking, so you won't have to memorize anything or keep track of things. And I want to ask you, Joan, since we have students here today, and they're going to be graduating soon and facing a really difficult job market, some of them may be wondering, is this still a relevant issue today? Is fair pay a problem that they should be concerned about?
Yes. Let's see. The wage gap, as many of you know, back in 1963, when Kennedy signed the Equal Pay Act, was women's wages were, median wages, year-round wages were 59 cents compared to $1 for men, and now it's 77 cents and it's sort of leveled off. We were making more progress, and then things leveled off, and it's been 77 cents for several years now. Young women, of course, especially college-educated young women, have an advantage now, and sometimes young men are having trouble getting work. The Wall Street Journal yesterday had an article about how there's no wage gap among urban, childless workers who are between the ages of 22 and 30. Many of those people are young women who are very educated and have work, and many of the young men are having to work at lower paid jobs than they usually would. So you'd think that this would be an indication that there's no problem anymore. But there are thousands and thousands of people in the workforce, and both the men and the women who do women's work type of jobs, the things that have to do with taking care of people, and also women in general do have a continuing problem. So we not only need to encourage young women to negotiate well for their first salaries, but then we need to also work with people as they move through the years in their careers.
Joan, I think we got this one back. Can you elaborate for us a little bit about what does this mean? What are the actual effects? Can you give us some concrete examples of what we're talking about when we experience a wage gap?
This is from a Newsweek article last year, but still very clear. As I said, the gap is still the same. Basically, it's 8 months' worth of groceries for a family of 4, not extravagant, etc. There are indications that people have calculated actually, that over a lifetime, a female college graduate will be paid. She will earn more than she will be paid. She will be paid $1.2 million less. These are the women who didn't graduate yesterday maybe, but graduated a short time ago. And in terms of a female MBA graduating from a top-tier school, compared with her male colleagues in her first job out of graduate school, according to a 2010 Catalyst study, $4,600 less. And some of that comes from not negotiating for a higher salary, but a lot of it has to do with just the way things are and what people are offered and what people are willing to do. We'll talk a little more later about how difficult it is for women to negotiate salaries and not be thought of as pushy, aggressive, et cetera, negatively. There are 3,168,000 women employed as secretaries, quote, in 2008. It's still the most common job for women.
Thank you, Joan. During the planning, it occurred to us that, there's a lot of statistics, there's a lot of very legal information that we could share with you, but maybe perhaps the most compelling thing to do is to share real life experiences and have those people talk about their work and what they have observed of this issue. All of you have probably been aware of the fact that the Supreme Court is currently looking at Dukes versus Walmart Stores Incorporated, which is the largest civil rights class action lawsuit related to sex discrimination in the U.S. In U.S. history. And we're particularly happy that we have an opportunity to have someone who has been looking at this very closely, Jamie Dolkas, who is a staff attorney from Equal Rights Advocates. She is here, I believe, to give us an update on this. Jamie manages ERA's advice and counseling hotline. She supervises and mentors law clerks and does all kinds of wonderful things. And she was just in DC, where she presented in front of the Supreme Court about the Walmart case.
And I should clarify, I didn't present, but I was there to support the plaintiffs. Joe Sellers did the argument for plaintiffs. That would be exciting if I was, but so most of you have probably heard about the case. Can everybody hear me okay? Most of you have probably heard about the case, but for anybody who isn't familiar with it, Dukes versus Walmart is a sex discrimination class action lawsuit brought on behalf of potentially 1 million women who were paid less than their male coworkers and denied promotions at Walmart. And it might be kind of hard to see there are some numbers up here about what women and men are paid. I'm sorry. And thank you, these are great numbers, by the way. And these are very persuasive, but I think also the individual stories of the women at Walmart are also extremely powerful. And although these women worked in different stores across the country, their stories are actually remarkably very similar. Many came to Walmart with high hopes. They assumed that because this was such a large retailer that they would have excellent training and opportunities for promotion. They came to support their families and to pursue opportunities. And many of them in their class declarations talk about how every chance they got, they asked their managers, when can I get promoted? How do I get on the fast track? What do I do to get better training? And over time, they became very disillusioned with Walmart. They quickly learned that they were being underpaid significantly. One of the most powerful stories is from one of the class members named Sue Brown. And she explained that even though she had a master's degree and had been working at Walmart for 4 years, several high school boys who were recently hired, who she had trained in her department, were paid more than her. Yeah, I mean, and the class declarations are full of these stories that echo what Sue Brown was talking about, with just really dramatic pay disparity. One of the named plaintiffs, Chris Kwapnowski, also experienced pay disparity at Walmart. She was the most tenured hourly employee there, and she had been there for 14 years, but she was actually paid the same as another employee who'd been there half the time and had half the experience. And she asked her general manager, after another male associate received a promotion, why it had gone to him and why he had received the raise. And the manager said, well, it's because he has a family to support. Never mind the fact that Ms. Kwapnowski is a single mother who was supporting 2 young children at the time. So, and even the women who did manage to make it into management, they found themselves in stores that were understaffed, run down, very low volume stores, whereas the men who received promotions into management went into high volume, high profit stores. And at Walmart, the manager pay is based exclusively on store profits. So these assignments were just another way that unfair pay was perpetuated against women. So Equal Rights Advocates, we helped Betty Dukes file her original EEOC charge 10 years ago, and on March 29th, we had the arguments before the Supreme Court. So it should be June when the decision comes down, we're hoping. And the court will just be deciding the procedural issue of whether the plaintiffs can proceed as a class or as a group, and they haven't gotten to the merits yet. So stay tuned for that. But as Betty Dukes likes to say, this is a David versus Goliath case, and class action is a necessary tool for low-wage workers to fight these Goliaths, to challenge systemic discrimination, and to stand up against out-resourced defendants like Walmart. So we're hopeful and we're eagerly awaiting the decision, but yes, stay tuned.
Thank you so much. To help all our speakers today, we have Carla in the front row who'll be giving you the 2-minute warning and the 1-minute warning. And it's going to be, she's very persistent with that, so just keep an eye on Carla and the bright blue here. I'm very happy to introduce next Ruth Silver-Taube. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm sorry if I didn't. She is the supervising attorney of the Workers' Rights Clinics at the Catherine and George Alexander Law Center of Santa Clara University School of Law, and she serves as special counsel to the Legal Aid Society Employment Law Center. She's previously worked at the EEOC, and what's really interesting is that she was a journeyman machinist, president of IAM Local 547, and field representative for SEIU Local 535. So, Ruth, your background is certainly unique and very relevant to the discussion today. Can you share a little more about the work you've done and your experience with this issue of fair pay?
I worked as a machinist for 9.5 years, including at Rockwell International, where I ran a mill, and Linda has put up a picture of a mill, and this is a really old mill. My mill was much more, Linda is laughing, Linda Ardonio Dixon, who used to work at the EEOC, was a machinist. Who does work at the EEOC as a staff attorney, was a machinist as well. And these are probably around vintage World War II, but that's the one, yes. And the original turret, I ran a turret lathe at ITT Jennings, which is on McLaughlin Avenue in San Jose. It's now Jennings, but it used to be ITT Jennings. And in the initial picture we had was a vertical turret lathe, and I actually ran the horizontal one, which was more modern, but it's generally, I mean, this is an approximation. In any case, at ITT Jennings, I was, they didn't want women machinists, but as the HR person said, they thought they should have one. And so he was very forthright, and he said it was time we hired one, and it was for reasons of, they could show they had one. But they still weren't very sure that women machinists could do what the men did. So they put me on the same machine as a man. I worked day shift, he worked night shift. And we worked literally on the same parts. I would come in the morning, I'd machine the part. He would come in on the swing shift, he would machine the exact same part, and it would go like that. Well, I was hired in as a production machinist, labor grade 6. He was hired in as a journeyman, labor grade 9. And that didn't seem right to me. And so I threatened to go to the EEOC. And my appointment was on a Monday, and on the Friday, they said that they'd been thinking about it and that maybe they would promote me to a journey, it was called journeyman, but journey person position. And so I also happened to notice that there were women, and they were in the assembly section, because basically all of the women were in the assembly section. But they didn't look to me like they were assembling. In fact, they looked to me like they were welding. I mean, there was no question that these women were welding, except they were called assemblers and they were labor grade 2, whereas welders, who were all male, were labor grade 7. And again, I called the EEOC, and in this case, there was an investigation, a cause finding, and we won. We won a grievance, and we also won at the EEOC, and the women were promoted. Additionally, since the company only wanted one woman, they wanted to exclude other women because women saw me. I mean, I'm not the biggest thing, and I was doing a good job, and so they wanted to get in there because they wanted to get more pay. So the employer instituted a test. There was never a test before for the men, but there was now a test for the women. So in the bathroom, I trained the women on reading vernier calipers and micrometers and doing decimal equivalencies, and lo and behold, the women all passed the test, and they had to bring the women in there. And when I first came in, there was initial hostility from men to my presence, but I gradually earned their respect. And initially, they characterized me as a man in a woman's body. And they said I had more guts, they used a different word, than most men. And the man who trained me at Rockwell said that he had to change his whole view of the world now that he realized that women were capable of doing this kind of work.
Also here with us today to share her experiences with the wage gap is Meg Bassi, who is the Executive Director of Tradeswomen, Inc. Meg has worked as a construction electrician for 30 years and is a member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local Union 302 in Martinez, California. She too obtained her law degree. Meg worked with the East Bay Community Law Center and subsequently with the Port of Oakland. Meg also serves on the board for the Cypress Mandela Training Center, a nationally recognized nonprofit pre-apprenticeship training provider located in Oakland, California. And Meg, our question is similar. What has been your experience with this issue of the wage gap between men and women?
Well, I think I should speak a little bit more about sort of the hidden wage gap, which has to do with the category of work that women do. I'll just speak a little broadly and then talk about my own experience. 67% of the minimum wage jobs in this country are held by women. We've made tremendous strides at the professional level, but when you look at other areas of work, women hold the unpaid or the lowest paid positions, and that's an important aspect that we need to put on the table, not just on a work-by-work position, or in some cases it can be, as Ruth pointed out, where the job title is the difference rather than the work. I also think it's important to mention the issue of color, because the wage gap for women of color is on the whole still greater. Some of that has to do with wage classification in the work, but it's important to mention that that's still a very live issue in many workplaces in America, and women of color need to be aware that they can suffer a double layer of discrimination. I came into construction work partly because of pay, the issue of gender equity and pay. I realized that as a teacher in the 70s, I was never going to get good wages. The work situation was very bad, then you may not remember, but it was not good. And I thought, well, you know, I'm living on my own. Nobody's giving me a discount for showing up at the grocery store. I better get, you know, pension, healthcare, and benefits. And I also like working with my hands and working outside, and, you know, was fairly fit. And so I worked construction. And I worked non-union construction first, and then realized I wanted training. And I also, in a unionized setting, I had a much greater chance of getting paid exactly the same. So that was my experience. But what was not my experience was that I had the same working conditions as a man. And that is still the case in a lot of different areas, including upper management from my own experience later on in life. You are not necessarily working under the same working conditions as your male counterparts, even at the professional level. And this may not be aware, you may not be aware of this until you sort of work and talk a little bit. But I was the 8th woman in my union. There were 1,000 men working out of the hall. I'm an electrician. I do outside work. It's called inside wireman, but it's what you would think of as an electrician. It's everything in this building is done by inside wiremen. You know, it's not the pole work, but everything from the pole to the plug. The distribution, everything is inside wire work. And I did that, I worked with the tools for 20 years. I would not have had my job without government, without the office, without Equal Rights Advocates, and without the office, the OFCCP, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, because I would have never gotten an interview for the apprenticeship. There was no pressure. I mean, those were the people who brought pressure.